And now, a show with inappropriate language. The Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week it's back to business. But it's not a total business episode, because while my guest, Matt Peterson, gets brands and resorts and youth marketing and building community better than most, it's not only because he was born into the ski and snowboard industry. Matt gets things better than most because he's a former pro rider who's just as passionate today as the first day he fell in love with snowboarding back in the Midwest. Before we talk all things Matt Peterson, I need to do some thank yous. My first thanks goes to Dave Goto at Aura Ring. Dave sent me a sizing kit for an Aura ring, and then my Aura ring arrived today. It's replacing my wedding ring, which I lost earlier in the year because I lost so much weight that my fingers became skinnier and it fell off. So this ring's replacing that, and it has so many cool features that my wedding ring didn't. I mean, my wedding ring could open a beer, but that's all it could do other than symbolize my love for my wife. But this new ring that I have, it has so many features I don't even know what they are yet. But it's high-tech shit that I will tell you about once I start using it. So I've got this new ring, but even better, I have a new freaking sponsor. And it is the perfect match for you. It's the perfect match for me. The brand is something that you may not have heard of yet, but the product is something that 90% of the people who listen to this podcast will want. I'm talking about Alpine Vans and the custom sprinter vans they fabricate for you. Alpine Vans is the team of guys that Cody Townsend trusted to build out his van for his 50 project. And if you haven't seen that van, well, you will, and it's a functional thing of beauty. Alpine Vans always has a stock of all-wheel drive sprinters on hand, and you can have a custom one in your driveway in 3 months. There's more about Alpine Vans in their ad. I also want to ask you to support my other amazing sponsors. They are Stanley, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Rollerblade. Finally, I want to thank you for listening. I want to ask you to tell a friend about the show. With podcasts, they're really hard to find. It's not an easy search. So if you tell a friend that you know will like the show, well, they'll hear it and the show will grow a little bit. It's greatly appreciated. It's also appreciated if you follow me on Instagram. I'm trying to get to that 10,000 follower mark, and I'm very, very close. I just need every single one of you who is listening to follow me there. It's at the Powell Movement. Now, let's talk to Matt Peterson.
Hello.
Matty P.
What up?
Not too much, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. I heard you're a little worried that you thought I might roast you on this podcast, but don't worry, there's going to be none of that.
Okay, good.
If I were to roast you, what would be the thing that you'd be afraid of me to roast you for?
No, I don't think I've got any skeletons. I think a recorded conversation is just stressful.
It won't be too painful at all. And yeah, I didn't think there was any skeletons. I didn't find any. And you're one of those guys that's really hard to get a lot of information about, especially with your childhood, but that's kind of what I do. So while I know that you spent most of your time in the Midwest growing up, I heard rumors that there was time on Vashon Island. Is that true?
Straight up. Yeah, so I was born and raised there.
Whoa, born on Vashon?
No, I was born in Seattle.
Okay, I was going to say, that's scary.
No, but I grew up there until I was in elementary school. My dad was in the ski industry, but he actually didn't work for K2, which is kind of funny, because it's such a small place. But yeah, Vashon, Puget Sound, man, this place is so beautiful.
What did your dad do in the ski industry on Vashon not working for K2?
Right.
I mean, Hart was there as well, I think, at one point.
Yeah, so my dad is just an OG ski guy. I was born and raised into this thing. And so he was a GM in the Midwest. He ran a couple of resorts. He was the GM of Lutsen Resort, and he was the GM of Wild Mountain, Minnesota. But before, or kind of in between there, he was the international distributor for Blizzard skis. He worked for A&T Bindings. So he's kind of like done everything from like hard goods to services. And he just commuted. At that time, he would commute to Vancouver, and I think he worked a lot of like satellite stuff. But just funny, he's really into sailing. And yeah, we grew up on Vashon. K2 was like a community center.
Yeah, it seems like the hub of that island was K2 at that point. It's kind of changed a lot since then. But with your family over on Vashon, it's not like it was mom, dad, and you as the only child. There's like 5 kids, and it's a full-on team in your family. When you have a team like that, does it create a lot of freedom for an up-and-coming kid?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm the youngest of five. And so I get along great with my family. I'm super lucky. But being the youngest of five, you can imagine you're a dad. Like, how tired of parenting are you like 12 years later? So my brother and I, we had a lot of freedom, both on the island. I was pretty young. And then we moved to northern Wisconsin, just north of Minneapolis, St. Paul, when I was in first grade, I think.
So that's where you grew up, is in Wisconsin.
Oh, yeah. I claim Midwest. I've got like a Midwest twang in my roots when I say awesome.
Are you a Packers fan?
No, I mean, I'm such like a fair weather sports fan. Team sports have never been my thing. I'm really interested in more like the party atmosphere and the chips and dip. I'm pretty much going with whoever wants to win.
Okay. So does the family end up moving to the Midwest because of a resort opportunity for your dad? Is he pretty much presented something and it's like, all right, guys, we're heading out to the Midwest?
Yeah. So I was a young guy and my sisters were all about 2.5, 3 years apart. So kind of stretched from like, a senior in high school all the way to, kindergarten, first grade. And so, yeah, there was an opportunity, my dad, to move back to his roots just north of Minneapolis, St. Paul, to Wild Mountain. So he decided to go back there and I think be actually the vice president of marketing before he moved into the GM role. What a cool experience. The Midwest is, true blue and, it's a really cool place to grow up. There's just a lot of solid people out there.
You get into skiing, I'm sure, right away because that's the family business. And eventually you see snowboarding in the Midwest. Do you remember when you first saw it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. So I started snowboarding in 1986. So I was in second grade and it was the coolest thing ever, right? Like, so I skateboarded all the time. I came from like a family of ski racers. So everyone was, super into ski racing.
Okay.
My dad's in the ski game and, he grew up around that. He sponsored like skiers and, everyone in my family, they were all like state sponsored racers, not state sponsored, but like they'd make to the,
they're good.
Whatever you call it. Yeah, they were good, so I would always be out there with them. But skiing was always like, man, there were a lot of like coaches and yelling and drills and stuff. And in the summers I would skate, we'd build ramps and, we were just skateboarding. So when I saw snowboarding come to the Midwest, it kind of blew my mind. It was just like counterculture, action sports, like colliding with winter. And I was really into snow and in Midwest, you kind of have to be,
Yeah.
And so it was so cool. Actually, crazy story. K2 did a big kind of push in the late 80s there to bring snowboarding to the Midwest because they just like, made it legal. Sorry for the background noise. I'm underneath a mega ramp at Woodard.
Okay.
It's where my office is. Anyway, my dad was actually one of the first guys to like allow it in the Midwest because, there are a lot of family run operations out there. They're smaller and they're like scared of snowboarding. What is it? So they said it was cool. So I jumped on it immediately. There was like a family coup. I was like, I'm not skiing anymore. I'm a snowboarder. So Dan Donnelly, he was like one of the first, K2 pros. He had a pro model. He came to the Midwest and Craig Kelly came to the Midwest with a Burton tour.
No way.
Yeah, dude. And they were just kind of like, promoting snowboarding. They were just like, this is cool.
It's building the sport time.
Exactly. Burton was always so good at that, right? Like promoting the sport and working with the resorts and, all the municipalities to make it possible. And so they would do this tour where like, it would be like a group lesson. They were like, okay, I'm gonna go to this resort one day and that resort. And they came to our resort and I was there, man. Craig Kelly freaking had the pants with the knee pads. And he said the coolest thing. He's like, what do you do if you're out of control? And we were all like, second grade or more. And we're like, I don't know. And he said, sit down. Or maybe he said fall down, but either way, I've used that line like so many times. Like, yeah, when I'm teaching my kids or I'm out with people who are like, I'm out of control. You're like, sit down now. It gets worse the longer you stand up.
And it's amazing Craig Kelly told you that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just really cool. I mean, it was just a, minor interaction, but like, it's just fun to be in the sport for so long. And, I've been snowboarding for 35 years, pretty full time. I mean, I bet I've shredded up more than 100 days every year. Some years like way more.
When you were coming up, were you riding more than just weekends? Was it like every day after school too?
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. Yeah. Every day. My dad worked there. So then my family worked there and then we started working there. That was like my first job. So I was there every day. I was there every day after school or in kindergarten. I'd be there half day. But it's just like in a small town in the winter, there's not a lot else to do. You go like ice fishing. I wasn't really into that. So yeah, I snowboarded all the time.
And when do you end up hooking up with the crew that becomes your riding crew? Because I know Chad Otterstrom and there's a few other guys that become like your everyday crew, I believe. When does that happen?
Yeah. So let's see. It would have been the early 90s. So I think I met Chad when I was in middle school. It's pretty crazy. So I rode with these two kids all the time. Marty Carlson, who was just a legend, this little kid, legend snowboarder. And then Matt Swanson. And then Will Ritter from Spark. He was part of that Wild Mountain crew. And so it's just kind of this funny thing in the early 90s. If you were a snowboarder, like it was so counterculture back then. I mean, there was probably 2 snowboarders at my school, maybe. And so you would find kids from these other schools and they would be like, yo, what's up? You snowboard? Like, me too. Let's hang out and be friends. And, you know, in small town Midwest, that was huge because all of a sudden we've got your friend network quadruples and there's people who are into shit that you're into. And anyway, so I was hanging out with Marty and Matt all the time. And then it was super funny. We'd ride troll hogging a lot too. One day, it's like a Wednesday night because we all shred after school. And my friend Matt's like, yo, you got to meet my friend Chad. He can do 720s and backflips. And I had never seen either of those tricks, right? This was early 90s in the Midwest. And I swear to God, the same run, you know, Chad doesn't say anything. He's really quiet, dude.
Yep.
And in the same freaking run, he does a 720 and a backflip at Trollhagen. And my mind was just like so blown. And then we were homies from there on out. And, you know, we've shredded all over the world together. And he's one of my, like, you know, super best friends. And yeah, we've been snowboarding together for like a lifetime.
And with that crew, you guys are getting really good really fast, it seems like. And I don't think anybody has big sponsors back then. But there are some Midwest brands that your crew's associated with. I think there's Kingpin Snowboards and there's Beacon Clothing. And were you hooked up and part of that crew too? Or is that just a select couple of you guys?
Oh, man, I wish. Like Beacon, the coolest, right? And Kingpin, so dope. And so Chad was like hands down the best. Like, you know, it's good to go ride next to people who are so much better because like every day they remind you of how much better they are. And so Chad got sponsored right away. We all went to this like Midwest USASA Nationals up at Giants Ridge. And Chad had just gotten sponsored by Kingpin and Beacon, but we were all there. But my dad was in the ski game. So he like, you know people or whatever. So he got me sponsored by this company called Rad Air, which is like European brand. But it was pretty funny, right? Because I think they were distributed through Heart and there was like some connection. And I was good, but I wasn't like sponsored good. It was my first experience like saying you're sponsored, but it wasn't like not a whack brand, but not a tight brand. And so it's like I learned that at an early age. Like it's not cool just to be sponsored. Like if you're going to be sponsored, you got to be sponsored by like tight brands. Otherwise, it's so lame. You're just like getting clowned on the slopes for rocking like just something. So I had this funny ass brand. It was big in Europe and Red Lamb, like that dude's a G. And so I just remember, you know, it was so funny. Like you just learned that lesson. You're like, I'm sponsored. And you're like, that's whack. And so I kind of made myself a promise from there. I was like, I want to ride for tight brands.
Well, it's funny because look at your whole career. It's kind of like you're one of those guys that gets it. It just kind of seems like in all the decisions you've made, you've been able to see through the bullshit and get what's cool within the industry. And it kind of starts maybe with that Rad Air sponsorship, realizing that it's not cool to be sponsored by someone who's lame.
Oh, man. Thanks for saying that. It hasn't always felt that way. But yeah, I mean, I think it means something, right? Like, I think when you're a kid, you're like, I want to be sponsored so I can say I'm sponsored. But then when you do that, you realize like, oh shit, like you got to do things. You got to be a spokesperson for this thing. And snowboarding was the way less of a business back then. You know, all I wanted to do was just like hang out with my friends, learn new tricks, go to new places. And so then, yeah, exactly. I think it's really key. Like snowboarding is such a young sport that, you know, we're kind of writing our own narrative. And, you know, people have taken hold of that reins many times, but I know I realized it real early, like what snowboarding was for me. And it wasn't necessarily a business.
Yeah. You're riding all winter with your crew. How about the summers? Are you fortunate enough to be able to go to the summer camps and go to Hood?
Okay, this is a good story. So not really. So, you know, I kind of grew up in the family, you know, middle class, but 5 kids, you know, and so my dad was in the ski industry. So I was always laced up in like the snow side of things, but, you know, 5 kids, you know, there wasn't a lot of extra money to go,
it's expensive.
You know, some $2,000 summer camp in Oregon.
Yeah.
So check this out. So I remember down the street in St. Croix Falls, where I grew up in Wisconsin, there was a factory and it made ice auger transmissions. I would ride my bike there Like all summer long, I'd make like $6 an hour or maybe $4.25. I don't remember, but not much. And I would put on these safety goggles and like a lab coat, and there'd be this huge, like couple $100,000 lathe. And there were two buttons. There was like a red button and a green button. And I'd hit the green button and it'd make all this noise. I'd have my headphones on and whatever. And then I'd open up the door. I'd take this tiny ice auger transmission out and inspect it, then put the next piece of metal in. And I did that all summer to save up money to go to Hood one time where I paid for it. And I remember getting to Hood and it was like, it blew my mind, but I had to work like $6 an hour, like for all summer to do it. And I was like, man, next time I come out here, I'm going to be a coach. So I did once and, I learned my lesson. Like it's cool, but you got to have means to do that stuff.
Yeah, it's expensive, but when you get there, I mean, are your eyes just open to just the different terrain and features that you don't see in the Midwest? I mean, is it like a playground?
Oh my God. Like, I mean, it was Shangri-La, right? Like all I wanted to do was snowboard. I was in the Midwest. It was like, very conservative place. It was like team sports all the way through. I didn't want to do any of that stuff. We watched like Aspen Extreme and, Mac Dog movies. We're, in like TV movies and, up in the ante. And all I wanted to do was snowboard with my friends. So I was like pretty hooked. Like that's what I was going to do. So when I saw that existed and there was a path ahead of me, I was all about it.
Okay. And then in thinking back to your school days or your riding after school, I talked to Chad earlier, and he said that in 11th grade, he and his crew was kicked out of Trollhagen and had to go to Wild Mountain in 12th grade. Now, were you part of the crew that was kicked out?
No. So I wasn't. I was part of that crew, but I didn't get kicked out. Because like I was in this scene where like my dad was like, we're in a small industry. So like we knew the GM. He probably like gave us a season pass or something as like a family friend thing.
Sure.
So I always had that rolling on my deal. Those guys were so funny. They would always be like smoking grits and like such hoodlums. They were really embracing like Tarquin Robbins and like the shred scene. And we had our own Midwest scene. So, it was a little gritty. And so, and snowboarding at that time was so anti-establishment, right? It was like, fuck the cops, fuck the people. Like it was just like, let's do this thing. Let's haul that picnic table out and jib it. Maybe we'll spray paint it. And, that counterculture thing was so real and so cool. And I had a pass to Trollhagen. So I'd ride over Trollhagen with those guys. And then I'd ride over Wild Mountain with other guys like Will and a bunch of other kids. But then they got kicked out of Trollhagen because they were on the real tip. Then they came to Wild Mountain. It was super funny. They would get in trouble there. And I'd have to like go tell my dad or whatever and be like, they're awesome. We're just having fun. We're not hurting anybody. But the Midwest is just conservative, So it's just like, if they're unfamiliar with it, they don't like it.
But did your dad get it and he kind of let things slide because he understood?
I think he was cool about it. But I mean, those dudes were in the office, like getting yelled at. I mean, it's funny, right? Because, skiing and snowboarding is so different, right? Like in the Midwest, like the mountain is probably the biggest employer in the town and everyone goes there. So it's almost like an extension of school or the community. So everyone's got to follow the rules and there's like, a community contract kind of feel. It's not like it is now where like you buy a ticket and you go to the ski resort and that's it. And you go, it's like everyone knows each other. It's like a small thing.
Yeah. I mean, I guess when you go to a lot of the big places, it's not community at all because you pay your $150 and you expect a service, but it's almost like what you've done at Boreal where you are now. It's like you're building community there. And that probably all comes from where you grew up, but just the community feel of the Midwest.
Yeah, I think so. I had a cool opportunity. I grew up shredding. I got to be sponsored. I traveled all around the world at X Games and, did some really fun stuff, worldwide bar tour, and I started Academy Snowboards with JB. And then I went back to school a couple of times. And then so when I had the opportunity to get back in the ski industry, but on the service side, it was kind of a trip because I was always on the brand side of like hard goods or soft goods or pro side. And then all of a sudden I'm on this side where I'm the vice president of Boreal and Woodard. And Soda Springs is part of Powder Corporation. So it's 3 brands. And I think you're right. Like, I mean, it's such a different thing. We're a small resort. We're almost like a Midwest resort, but in Tahoe, like surrounded by giants.
You're the small casino in Vegas, like with everyone else, and you have to try to make more noise than MGM Grand.
Dude, straight up, I mean, I think it's funny because it's all about the underdog controlling the narrative, like we're in a fun industry. Like Boreal's a brand that's like self-deprecating all the time. And we never take ourselves too seriously, so we like to do fun, cool stuff. And that's really neat because we are the small casino. I always kind of relate it to like your favorite restaurant or bar. Like I don't go to the most expensive places. I don't often feel comfortable there. And so that's kind of the vibe we try to put out here, like, do you feel comfortable here? Do you like it? Was it worth it? Would you recommend it to a friend? Like we're not trying to be something we're not.
Now it's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to put Alpine Vans up front this week, as I know if you're like me, you've looked at a Sprinter before and you're wondering how you can fit it into your life. There are so many choices, but Alpine Vans is the one-stop shop to get it done right. Alpine was started by a ski patroller who wanted to avoid the commute required to close one day and open the next. He wanted to keep his boots warm, have hot coffee, and get a good night's sleep. Well, after perfecting his own van, he realized that it doesn't matter if you're the bougie type, a dirtbag, whatever. You want a vehicle built for adventure, and that's what Alpine Vans delivers. They've thought of the dry flush toilet for easy winterization and trash can disposable waste. They know you need to be confident that your battery-powered AC works for those times that you want to leave your dog behind to hit the single track. They know all the ins and outs of what you need for a Sprinter van built for adventure. I'll be sharing more about Alpine Vans each week this summer, but for now, know that they always have an inventory of all-wheel drive vans. They can have your dream van to you in 90 days. And to find out more about Alpine, you can head on over to alpinevans.com and make sure you check out the Quote Builder. Just the questions they ask in that Quote Builder let you know the attention to detail and the thoughtfulness that they're going to put in your build. So please check out Alpine Vans. My next sponsor is Stanley. And it's already summer in my eyes, and if you aren't ready for your camping, hiking, and general outdoor adventure needs yet, it's time to get on it. And you and yours deserve the best stuff out there. And Stanley has been setting the industry standard of innovation and quality and getting you out there since 1913. By listening to the Powell Movement, you're going to get the best deal you'll find on all Stanley products anywhere. It's through this podcast. I'll get you 30% off everything Stanley. All you need to do is head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and use the code DRINKFAST. That's all one word, all lowercase at checkout, and you'll get that deal. Spend over $100 and I'll throw in a limited edition Powell Movement beanie. So please support the folks at Stanley and make sure you're dialed in for the summer. My final sponsor is the 10 Barrel Brewery out of Bend, Oregon. I love their beers and I love their mixed drinks, and recently I've started drinking this new thing called Clean Line Hard Seltzer. And I've always been a bubble water fan, and that's what Clean Line is, with an alcoholic kick. I'm going to guess that this type of alcoholic water drink is going to be a huge hit, and 10 Barrel has knocked it out of the park with Clean Line. They've also knocked it out of the park with the way they support action sports. If you ski, snowboard, or bike, you know 10 Barrel supports some amazing athletes, creates amazing events, and donates to causes like Protect Our Winners and the Surfrider Foundations. They put their money where their mouth is. So next time you're at the store, try a 6-pack of 10 Barrel or their Clean Line Seltzer and support the beer that supports you. You can find out more about 10 Barrel over at 10barrel.com. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. I'm going to bring it back to the Midwest, and the most famous thing that the Midwest is known for, at least in my opinion, is First Avenue, or at least Minnesota, is a music venue, First Avenue. Did you ever see Prince or any good shows there?
Oh my God, so many good shows. I didn't get to see Prince. I was like probably too young for that, or I was like into punk rock or, alternative rock by the time I like had a license and could drive there. But the city was so rad. We'd go down there and go skate. We'd go see shows. We saw so many good shows there. Modest Mouse, freaking ton of punk rock shows. We saw a ton of like alternative shows. Like I remember seeing Beck there in like the mid 90s, and he was in like a captain's suit, like white with this captain's hat. It was so weird, but we would go for sure. Like it was a long drive for me because I was about an hour north of the city.
Oh, okay.
Where Chad and those guys were a lot closer, but like, hell yeah, Midwest, Minneapolis, St. Paul, like it's such a cool place because I felt like a lot of like the trends would go left to right, east to west, but they wouldn't always go up to Minneapolis, because all the bands would travel like on Interstate 70 or below. And so the bands that did go up there, like, I don't know, they had their own flavor, and Minneapolis is rad.
It's a good place to get a Juicy Lucy, I believe, where it was invented. But snowboard crew-wise, I think you're a couple years younger than Chad and maybe the other dudes you were hanging out with. And Chad, I think, moves out of town. He heads to Colorado. Is it just you for a while? Like you're a lone wolf and you feel like your crew is gone?
Yeah, that was weird. Well, we had another crew that was a little bit younger. all sorts of kids. They were in our Army of Darkness, our AOD crew we had, which was pretty dope. And so, yeah, it was like Jason Landry, Jake Weber, a bunch of kids. And so we were all kind of competing, and we were from different places around the Midwest, but we'd always meet up at like the contests or whatever. But my like tight crew for sure like dissolved, and I wanted that back. So I ended up graduating a year early from high school when I was like 17. And then I went to college until I was 18. I kept snowboarding, but I was like really dead set on moving out west, and I was going to do that as soon as I could. So I remember getting with my parents and be like, hey, if I can pass the GED right now, will you like let me go? They thought about it for a week, and then they were like, no, you have to be 18. So I did graduate early and went to college, just like community college or whatever, almost finished my associate's degree. And then as soon as I turned 18 and graduated, I pretty much got on a Greyhound bus and seriously like with a backpack and a snowboard and got off from Minneapolis to Summit County, Colorado.
You just show up at Chad's house and you're like, I'm here, dude.
He was at Mount Hood digging. And so I was out there trying to figure out like how to live. And it was so funny, man. Like when I think back at it, I have kids now, and it's like, dude, I showed up with a backpack and a snowboard and a tent. And I was like, where's the top? And I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have a bank account. I had probably like $500. And then my job was to find a house for like this next crew that was coming out there. And no shit, I was camped on the side of the highway, what is it, 9, going from Frisco to Breck.
Yeah.
And check this shit out. I would go to the payphone. I would grab a paper. I'd call all these places and say, you could reach me at this number, which was the payphone. I'd like buy a tall boy. I was like 18. And then I would just camp out next to this payphone for hours waiting for like a landlord to call me back.
That's ridiculous.
It was absolutely ridiculous because I'd be like, yeah, this is a house for 9 people and a 2-bedroom. And I learned, after like 3 days there, I'd be like, yes, it's just me renting this house. But that was like pure ski bum. And, we found a place, and then Chad came back from Hood, and he had already had his like house all set up. So we were kind of setting up a new house. And anyway, so then we had 2 different houses for a while, and then he ended up making it big, bought a house, and I moved in with him.
And that first year out there, I feel like it's a huge year for your snowboarding because there's a bunch of contests. You've always competed in the USASA stuff. But when you get out to Colorado, I think the competition probably ramps up. And you do well in a lot of contests your first year. It's like you're hungry and you need to pay rent, and the contests are helping you out doing that. Which ones stand out to you as the ones you did well at?
Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, I showed up, and you're totally right. All those kids who move out from the Midwest, you're like, oh, I'm good. I won USASA nationals. And then all of a sudden, like, it's like Todd Richards lives in Breckenridge, and,
right.
Frank Wells and J2 and, all these like Merriman and, Ninja, all these guys are out there, and they're like legit pros. And you're like, damn, I'm not that good. So we went to an Aspen contest. And like I said, I always knew like where I was at because I rode with Chad every day, and he was just so freaking good. But I ended up doing good. And this is so funny. I was working at Loaf and Jug in Frisco. All you Summit County people, I think it's number 36. And so I went to a contest in Aspen. I got 4th place. And it turned out to be a qualifier for the freaking X Games. And I didn't know. I won like $1,000. That was like 4 months of rent. I was like about to be retired, right?
Yeah.
So I'd go back to Loaf and Jug, and I'm working there again. No cell phone, no nothing, no car. I'm taking the bus everywhere. And straight up, the X Games calls me at Loaf and Jug. Okay. And they're like, is Matt Peterson there? I was like, yeah, this is me. What's up? And like, I remember putting my phone number and the hours I worked. And they're like, hey, Daniel Frank can't come to the X Games. He's stuck in Europe. Do you want his spot? And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I was like, absolutely. And then, no kidding, like after that happened, I'm just sitting there like selling lotto tickets and gas, and Loaf and Jug and hot dogs and stuff. All of a sudden, my friend Pete comes in. He's like, you look, shook. What's up? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to the X Games, I think. I think I'm pro. Does this mean I'm pro? Like, I don't know what this means, And I'm like not ready at all. Like all the dudes who I was going to compete against, like I had posters up on my wall, Peter Line, Jeremy Jones, JP Walker. Like, dude, I wasn't ready to talk to those guys, let alone compete against them,
Right.
Anyway, so I ended up quitting that night from the place. And my friend Pete's like, dude, you can't just quit. You got to make this memorable. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, let's write a rap. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah. And he's a total instigator. And so we sat there and closed down the shop, my friends in there. And we write this rap, and her name was Flo. And it was all, yo, Flo, I'm out the door. I ain't working here no more. You got to find another bro for sure. And I left the key and we left. And that was it. I ended up coming back like 2 weeks later and apologizing and handing my shirt back in so I could still go buy hot dogs and soda there.
And was that the Summer X Games, like the San Diego one, or was that the Crested Butte
No,
one?
Crested Butte. Yeah, so that was a big one. So then I went to X Games that year. And like I said, it was a real trip because I just like would have been honest with anyone. Like I am totally not ready to compete with these guys. You know, I just got to Colorado. I'm learning new tricks. So like I've never hit these jumps. I don't know the scene, but like, you know, my crew was tight. So Chad got invited the same year. So he's like, come, you can stay on my couch. And he was sponsored by Silence at the time with Blaze and everybody. So he's like, you can stay with me and just do this thing. Right. And so I showed up. I didn't have a board sponsor or anybody I wanted to rep. And Chad always had cool brands. And so Blaze is like, hey, you want to ride one of our boards in X Games? And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, totally. And so I remember being really nervous because it was just like all happening super fast. And I just don't think I was like that good. And so I show up and I was like, well, how am I going to make the best of this? So I was like, okay, I'm going to go to the thrift store and go buy like a leisure suit. I'm just going to go make a fool of myself. I'm like, maybe that'll work. And so I show up and I'm like shaking hands with like Peter Line and stuff. And I'm like, what's up? You know, like, can you sign my board? And then I realized that in the practice day, I didn't have any like really like good enough tricks on like that level. Like those guys, you know, knew they were going to the X Games and they wanted to win. So I remember the day before was this like Ice Fang and Crested Butte, cold ass Colorado. And I learned like a switch 7, like a rodeo flip. I just tried it once and just did it and I landed it. I tried to do it like to 5, but I went to 7. But I landed it somehow. And it was one of those just like weird snowboarding moments that worked. And Peter's at the bottom and he's like, that was dope. And I was like, no way. I can't believe that just happened. And so I went the next day. We competed. I made a fool of myself. X Games, loved it. I think I got like, I don't know, 4th or 5th or something. And then that really, you know, sparked like a little mini pro snowboard career.
Is that when Salomon sees you and hooks you up and you get on their program a little bit?
Yeah, I remember the rest of the year, I just, you know, I went and did some other contests. I won a couple other ones. I was feeling really confident. And there's that snowboarding thing, you know, when you're doing good and you're landing tricks, like there's nothing you can't do. I mean, like I always said that, like snowboarding is like my superpower. It's crazy. Like when I'm on a snowboard, I can go faster than a speeding bullet and like ollie a school bus and carve down a mountain face. Like it's absolutely ridiculous. Like it makes me a superhero, you know?
Yeah. And
so I was riding that high and I remember sleeping I was doing a contest in Kirkwood and I was sleeping in a Toyota Corolla and it was cold, man. It was super cold. This was before I had like Gore-Tex and nice stuff, you know, it was back in the day. So I went to Salomon and they were like, hey, we're looking for like a jib park kid. And I was like, I'm your guy. And they're like, what do you want? I was like, to not sleep in a Toyota Corolla. And so the next year it was funny. It was just like, I'd never ridden for like, you know, a big company and like they would send me so much stuff and they'd book a flight. I had like a travel agent. It was so funny. I would call this lady and be like, I need a flight. She'd be like, great. Is business class okay? And I was like, what's business class? But anyway, so yeah, I remember I got traveling to like X Games again with like Mike Michalchuk and like he and I were hanging out. That dude is awesome. But what happened is they wanted a contest guy. That's how they kind of measured success. Or like big video parts. And at that time, it was really hard to get into videos. And that's what I wanted to do for sure. But I just did contests every weekend all around the country. And, you know, I did well and didn't do well. But I really didn't like it. I wasn't around with AOD. I was by myself all the time in these like hotels. And
you were expected to do just circus tricks, right? Like they wanted you to jump the biggest shit. And it was just like, that's what your role is with this company. And if you don't like it, well, you do what you ended up doing was leaving, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I left. I got super burnt out in snowboarding. I decided I was going to go move to Alaska for the summer. So I hopped in my car. I went and picked up my brother who was going to school in Madison. We drove to Alaska. We camped out all summer. I didn't talk to any sponsors, which really subsequently meant they didn't sponsor me anymore, which is, I see that now as an adult, but it's very much a social contract. But Planet Earth was always on my back, and Romy Thornton, shout out to that dude. He is such a cool guy and he always looked after me. And so I came back from like the woods and I was like, okay, I want to do it again. He's like, all right, here's a box of clothes. Go send it.
You're on Planet Earth there. And then Salomon, things kind of fall apart because you're not keeping in touch with them. But you're also tight or somehow you connect with Jeff Bond and you become good friends with him because Jeff's at Random Snowboards and you end up getting on the Random program.
Yeah. So I remember like painting my Salomons for a year and just did my own mini sub brand. It was so fun. And then, so I wrote, so Random I thought was super cool. Like there was Max Janke and I thought it was a really tight brand and I really wanted to ride for an independent company. So I wrote them a letter and, I was just like, I just want to go to Japan. Like, I'll ride for you guys. Just someone take me to Japan. That's all I want to do. Right. And so he loved it. He loved the hustler spirit. And I was always like, I'll ride for you, but I'll do all this other stuff. I'll write, I'll shoot photos, I'll help, keep people in line. Like I said, I always knew like it wasn't about just doing tricks for me. Like I was really interested in how things worked. So for every sponsor I had, I rode for tons of people like Smith and Oakley and 32 Boots, like for a long time. And so every time I had the opportunity to ride for anybody, I was always like, let me in the kitchen. Like, how do you make boards? How do you make clothes? Like, where's this stuff made? What's marketing like? And so that's how I really learned stuff, cause I was like, you're already paying me like $500 a month. Can you just like let me in the kitchen?
I want to help more for that 500.
Yeah, I know. It's so funny. But they were always like, Planet Earth, they'd let me go work with the designers, like just hang out back there and see how they cut up coats and where they source materials and trend books or whatever. Or I would sometimes work in the warehouse. I'd like ship stuff. So I was like, how does that work? Anyway, so JB and I got to be really close with Random. And he knew I wanted to do a lot more because I was always like, let me help more. And then from Random, we started a little sub brand called Our Icon, which basically is when he took over some ownership of that company.
Okay.
And that was a short run, but we did some really cool shit. We went to Japan and went to Europe and, snowboarding is kind of my magic carpet. And then in 2002, in the summer of 2002, we talk every day and he's like, Maddie, I've got an opportunity with an angel investor to start a brand new brand. And that was always my dream. I always wanted to start a snowboard company. And so I didn't have the capital, but I had the drive. I knew what's up. I'd been snowboarding forever. I was a pro. And so I was like, let's do this. And so he and I worked together and we founded the name, trademarked the name Academy. We came up with the logo. We started the brand. And that was in the late summer of 2002. And I remember I was coaching up at High Cascade and I went up there with the first prototypes. And it was just like the coolest.
When you start that brand with him, because he's got this crazy opportunity where it just kind of falls into his lap. And he's older than you. I think he's like a few years, maybe 10 years older than you or something like that. And you definitely have a sales and marketing mind. But when he's offered that opportunity, he's got all these meetings that he needs to go to and he needs to raise capital and do all these things. And you're his right-hand man in all these things. Are you sitting in these meetings and asking questions to these older business people and getting the info from them?
What a trip, dude. I think, for me, I have a hard time saying no because I'm just like a serial opportunist and, I'm adaptable. So all of a sudden, I'm like 20, I would have been like 24, I think, 23, maybe. And I'm in meetings with him with serious executives who are like Harvard Business School and like, IPOs and public companies. And we've got public shells and we want to invest in this. And all of a sudden I'm in these meetings and he's super smart. Like Jeff Bond, he is one of my biggest mentors and one of my best friends. And just like, I've learned so much from him, but all of a sudden I just be in this meeting and I just go for it. I'd be like, yo, you're missing the point. We've got the biggest AM team in snowboarding. These kids are all going to blow up. We've got our share of voice is, huge. And we represent like the boutique and the underground. And, this could easily be a sub brand of another brand, or we could grow this thing to the next level. And I was just like saying what I thought would be right. And it was what I believed. And it turned out to be well received, not always, but, snowboarding, like I said, was less of a business for us. And I knew what we had. And, we were the hot new shit in like 2002 to 2006. Like we were like the number 4th recognizable brand behind like Volcom. And we had no budgets. It was like straight guerrilla and we got people on board and like we were hitting it so hard. And we had Chad Otterstrom, rider of the year, at that point. And we had the biggest AM team with Scotty and Grandies and Jonas and Casanova and all these guys. So anyway, we were on a rocket ship, but we were getting to a point where we needed more money, for production and for marketing and for all these things. So anyway, it was just such a trip that all of a sudden I was just this kid in these meetings and we just went for it. What a ride.
It's time for another sponsor break. And now that ski and snowboard season is over, Peter Glenn doesn't stop. They're the one-stop shop for all of your summer needs. You want a pair of inline skates, a wakeboard? Peter Glenn has it and has had it for over 70 years. They are a mom-and-pop group of shops that do a great job competing with the cutthroat online guys, but still offer a low price guarantee, free shipping on orders of over $50, and a no-hassle return policy. They support a lot of great things in action sports, this podcast, Johnny Mosley, and so much more. So when you go shopping, please check out peterglenn.com to get some of the best prices and the greatest variety of products on the internet. My final sponsor is Rollerblade, and if you haven't been on inline skates in a minute, well, you're missing out on the best kept secret in getting fit. Inline skating is the convenient and fun way to get a workout in, and it won't destroy your knees like running, it won't hurt your bank account like biking, and skating, it's easy. You can throw them in your suitcase on a trip or in your trunk, and you're good to go. No racks, no long waits for service or baggage charges. They're also the best way to get your legs in shape for ski season, and Rollerblade's Ski to Skate app is geared to do just that, get you ready to shred. You can find out more about Rollerblade over at rollerblade.com or get the free Skate to Ski app over at the App Store. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. The whole thing seems like a do-it-yourself lesson in how to start a brand. Because you guys don't know, I mean, you guys are smart guys, but it's not like you guys have a ton of education on how to do this, especially at that point in your life. And it's all about tenacity and wanting to learn. It's like, you don't know how to edit video, but you teach yourself that. You don't know how to be a designer, but you teach yourself that. You're not a trade show booth builder, but when you guys have the classroom at the trade show, it's like your vision is like, hey, I'm going to put a shit ton of hours in ahead of time to build a 12-foot pencil. I'm going to build a 10-foot ruler, and everyone's going to come to our booth and mess with it because it's going to be so cool. And while when you're sitting there building it, it might not seem like it's going to be as cool as it is. But when you get to that trade show and everything you say comes true, it's like a lot of those things that are just pie in the sky dreams that you have, you're able to turn into reality with just hard work and vision. That all works out, right?
Yeah, it's funny you say it that way. I haven't really thought about it that way. But, creativity is the ultimate competitive advantage, And I think we have that in spades, whether it was we were one of the first people to run like a 2-page ad that corresponded with like a big video that released at the same time and really thinking about integrated marketing in a different way.
You're the omni-channel guy.
Yeah, dude. Well, I mean, we were doing all sorts of shit. And then we were playing with it, right? We were having fun with technology at the same time. We were saying, okay, let's do the world's smallest McTwist. Let's do everybody's a winner. That's what I kind of was saying earlier. I think snowboarding kind of has this narrative issue where, for a long time, people have to say like what it is. And it's like, oh, you can't be a pro after 25 because you're washed up or whatever. We were trying to challenge that narrative from way back in the day, being like, it doesn't have to be about like death-defying spectacle to be successful. There's a lot of people out there and we can do fun things. Snowboarding is not supposed to be like this ultimate extreme sport. Like it's also this super cool, life-changing thing, it saves lives. We're out there shredding power, following our folly and the weather. And so anyway, it's really fun to like challenge that narrative from way back in the day. They still do it today. And it's work that I'm really proud of.
Another thing that you mentioned it a little bit, but you guys were really great about finding the talent that people hadn't found yet. The Greniers, the Scott Stevens, Nick Dirks. And is it something where it's like you find these guys, and I don't know if it's you or other guys on the AM team or however you're getting these guys, but is it something where it's like, hey, we know we have the future of the sport. We know we can't pay them, but we'll keep them for as long as we can until they grow and go to other brands. And while we have them, we're going to build our brand off them.
Yeah. Well, JB he can spot talent in really like young people. And then it would be my job to go take them into the field, And so I remember like kids like Joe Carlino and Cole Barish, and then on the rider side, exactly like Jonas Michelot and Mike Casanova and Grendies and Scotties, like seeing their sponsor me tapes from back in the day. So rad. But, I think where the kids would see it would be like, hey, this is a place that recognizes that amateur talent is important. So I think that the kids saw it as like a place where they could belong to, like a safe space for them, that you don't have to win the US Open to be sponsored. Like we saw talent differently. We were like, yeah, we're going to make you buy your first board on ProFarm. And we're going to tell you to like tell your homies about it and see how many boards you can slap around, because that's what's challenging about our sport to begin with, right? Like it doesn't really make sense from like the dollars and cents. Like I can do a 1440 quintuple chuck. That means I get paid $50,000 a year. You're like, dude, that has nothing to do with money or value, right?
Right.
But when you're a kid, you just see, well, that guy makes money and he can do these tricks. So that's what it shows you to emulate, with those demonstrations. But that's not true, right? Like you need a ski resort to sell lift tickets, to have a snowboard company to make boards, to sell those boards to a people. And it's this ecosystem that goes round and round. And sometimes it makes sense and sometimes it doesn't. But it's just this idea that if you wanted to be a part of Academy, like everybody pays dues. And like we were upfront about that. And these are kids who could have got free rides and probably money from other companies. But like I said, like whack brands, like if that's what you want to do, go do that. And all the power to you, like we're not trying to tell you you have to do it our way or not. Like it's a choice. Do you want to be a part of this train, which is probably less lucrative, but probably more fun, and that was kind of our approach to it. Anyway, it was super cool. So, and then I moved from being like a pro snowboarder to kind of team manager. So I'd work with Scotty and Chris and just all those kids. And they were right on the cusp of being like, superheroes. And that's tough, right? When you have like a big AM team that all of a sudden everyone needs to go pro at the same time, with small marketing budgets, it sets yourself up for some tough stuff. But, we were always cool. Like in any of those situations where the kids, went to other brands, like we're still all tight and that's all good. You know what I mean? Like we were never about being the best.
They have to realize that you guys weren't a big enough brand to really pay out the salaries that other brands were. And I'm sure they understood that. When you think of it, are you guys personally making any money off the project in the first 4 or 5 years, or is it all just lifestyle, travel, and passion?
There was money. In the beginning, we grew fast. So we were selling boards and, we were picking up international distributorship and we were getting paid like not a lot of money, but, we were definitely going around the world. We were traveling. We were doing super cool stuff like Transworld Team Challenges. And we have a spring event every year called the Academy Gathering, where we bring people in from all over the world. So yeah, I don't think it was people buying Ferraris and stuff, but there was money involved. We were tasting success. We knew where it could go.
And then with your personal snowboard career, you were still competing here and there a little bit in the beginning, and you were always filming. And in 03, 04, the movie Just Kidding, But Seriously came out. Did you have a part in that one or just clips?
I just had, I think, a clip or two, but no, that was Chad and Redness's video. And it was so cool. That was the chorus video. Gooner's part is still like so good. And everybody's part. That was right when we ran into some production problems. And that was right when we took on some financing. So it was just this tough year where the combination of this like insane video part rolls out and then some production woes and, some financial stress at the same time. So I think that was a pivotal year, but it was still a year that like solidified Academy as like a core brand, but a brand for the people, and we're coming up on 20 years with that company right now.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible. And that video, it seemed like it was almost like a whiskey video, just scantily clad women, excessive partying, just some of that stuff that you don't really see in snowboarding anymore. Is there anything like that these days?
I know, right? Okay, so this is what I was saying. Like, so snowboarding was way less of a business back then. Like, honestly, I barely saw a business plan before that time. It was like, I grew up with Blunt in the whiskey videos and Whitey videos. And like, that's what it was about for us. Like, it's so crazy now, especially where I'm at with Woodward. It's so much more structured and sophisticated with coaches and a plan and a performance regimen. And when I was doing it, it was not that way. We were like, holy shit, we got tickets to Europe, Beastie Boys, let's do this, I was hunting experience. And Academy provided that in spades. Like Chad and I slept all over the world, kicked out of hotels and bumming around Europe with like totally out of money, being like, dude, can I borrow another $100? And, for me, that was what I wanted out of it. I don't mean to say that it's bad that it's more sophisticated now or that it's more of a business, with coaches and plans and PR people and agents.
You're Woodward. That's where the coaches and that stuff come from, a little bit.
Well, no, I don't think so. I think you're right that it can, but Woodward plays a way different role. Like we support like the next generation of action sports. We provide like facilities and we provide like intuitive experiences for people to go learn at their own pace. Like we're not out there with like coaches and whistles and being like, it's time to roll.
No, but those dudes learning that 1440 quadruple cork, they're going to try to learn it at Woodward first, and then they're going to bring it to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true. And like Red Bull Rampage, those guys always come out here and like chuck huge backflips before they go send it in the desert. And that shit's cool. But I also think like there's this other side too. And I think that's an important piece. And it's a piece that's like, I think it's harder to find, where we have like professional people who can also pay homage to the history of lifestyle sports or gravity sports, because style is everything. And like I said, I think the narrative in snowboarding is run amok. Like literally people are trying to add another 360 onto their routine. And that is not where snowboarding has to go. That's where it can go, but we need to roll out some other narratives about how snowboarding is like a lifelong sport, and there's travel and there's new experiences and there's different ways to, engage in nature that isn't like a full, like wearing 3 helmets and a mouth guard.
There weren't that many mouth guards back in the day when you were coming up, I don't think. So other things that you guys did with the brand that really kept the brand on fire, I feel like, I mean, the team challenges, that was a big deal. Sticking to specialty retailers, that was a big deal as well. Making sure that you're building community within snowboarding. You're doing all that stuff. But the one thing that you can't see, that really no one can see, is the whole world's economy is going to come crashing down in like 2008, 2009-ish. And is that what sends you back to school and to get your degree?
Yeah, totally. I was living in San Diego. The whole world just comes exactly, screeching halt, excess cash, especially in travel and tourism, like goes away. And so San Diego wasn't a good fit for me. That like cliche of like people sitting down there detached from the industry, making all the calls. And I don't know. So I decided with my wife, we had just got married. We were living in San Diego for about a year. We moved back to Breck. Then we moved to Denver because I was like, I gotta get my shit together. And so I go back to school, finish up the undergrad in marketing and business. I was actually going to be a teacher for a minute. So I actually finished that degree and I was like, I'm going to be a teacher. And then I didn't like it. It was just a little bit too stand in line and wait. And I've always been on like the innovative teams and like move fast and make mistakes team. So then I went back to school again for marketing and business, but I'd always done it. And then while I was there, I was always still helping out with Academy. But I, took a kind of a break a little bit, took a break from snowboarding a little bit, and then started my own creative agency out there. And so I caddied in the summer when I was going to undergrad, and I'd work for like these really, wealthy business tycoons. But I was always like spoke my mind. They'd be like, what do you think? And I'd be like, I think you need to fix your stuff. I don't know how you're so successful. This isn't lame, And he'd be like, we need to hire you. And I'd be like, it's going to get weird if you hire me. We're going to go from being friends to me, your employee. And so they were like, well, take on work, like make a plan, bring storytelling and everything you've done in the past where you brought Academy, do it for us. So I did it for like financial services, which was pretty funny, and insurance. And I did some nonprofits, and it was really fun. It was like, I did everything I like to do, like build brands, be community focused, learn what matters to people, and, build your brands about that.
Did you have money to spend too for the first time?
Yeah. Oh my God. It was actually really fun. But it was funny, right? Like I'd have to wear a suit and tie one day a week when I go into these like high rises, and I'd be like, what up? And they were all like clicking away, but it was great. But I basically grew the brand, the agency, to a point where I either had to like get really serious and like hire a team, or I had to sell it, or I had to walk away. It was just like, it was kind of decision time, and it was going well. But I think like my wife and I were like, Denver's getting so busy, and we had just had our first kid, and we were like, do we want to stay here? Like we could make this work. And then we were like, man, wouldn't it be cool to move to like Northern California? And the opportunity came where there was a marketing director role at Boreal and Woodard. And I used to come here and help out with some projects, like Academy would do a camp out here.
You've always been involved with Woodard. I feel like you worked with Morrison creating brochures and doing stuff like in the early 2000s.
Yeah, totally.
And I think we might have even met back then. We sat down and had a meeting when I was at K2 about like a team week back a long time ago.
Dude, we have met a few times. You were so funny. I think you were on your way out because your like give a shit-o-meter was pretty low. And you're like, yeah, I'll send you the product. And I was like, word, okay.
Well, it was always with Woodard. I cut my teeth going to Woodward East in Pennsylvania with a K2 van and trailer. So when Woodward asked for anything, it was always like a yes. Like I didn't need a meeting. It was just like, give me your order.
Yeah. And I heard your podcast with Roy where you were talking about you're out there with the inline skates. And that's what's so cool about Woodward, right? Like Woodward is so core. It's like 1970. I mean, 50 years of action sports and giving like the outcast a home and a safe space to like do everything they want and build like everything they could ever imagine, you know, from Tony Hawk to Ryan Sheckler. Like it's such a cool company that like puts youth first and like capital behind it. Like that Woodward Park City project, dude, I don't know if there's ever been a single investment that's larger in action sports and in youth ever. And Powder did that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. It's like the coolest brand to be associated with. Like I keep telling my kid, I'm like, one day you're going to go to Woodward. And it's just one of those things that anybody who's into these sports can aspire to go to. And it's like all inclusive, not just in terms of like your meals are there. It's just like they welcome anyone. It doesn't matter if you scooter, if you skateboard, if you rollerblade. It just seemed like the place to be.
Yeah, man. Yesterday we just did this Skate Like a Girl, and Ally Skate came out, and I hired him to come up and do like an inclusivity and consent training. And it was so cool just to hear about like where they're at, and they're based in the Bay, and it's pretty progressive. But you know, when you kind of juxtapose that with like what we do, like you said, like, dude, every sport is welcome. Everything is cool. You know, it's important because the youth always tell us what's cool, right? It never works out for like the adult to tell the kid what's cool. Like this is the music, this is the sport. And action sports is kind of getting that way. They're like, that's not cool. This is cool, you know? But I'm like, you guys, like everybody's rebelling against what they grew up with and they're inventing the future, and the youth tell us what's cool. And Woodward is just like the spot where like that's true. And we put money behind it and we like put fuel to the fire.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing thing what you guys do there. And in terms of what you've had to do, I mean, it's not just Woodward. It's Soda Springs, it's Boreal, and it's like you have to beat the drum really, really loud to get people to hear you and realize that you're even there and an option for them. And I feel like the coolest way that you're able to do it, and probably the most unconventional way, is something we used to talk about this at K2 all the time, was like every year we'd come up with our $1 million idea of what we want to do, and there'd be 10 ideas. One of them was always we were going to set a Guinness Book World Record. We never did it. Because there's a lot of shit that goes into creating a Guinness Book World Record. But you guys created the largest cup of hot chocolate ever and got a Guinness Book of World Records entry there. Did that move the meter a lot? Did that get people talking about Soda Springs?
No doubt. Oh my God, that's so funny. I forgot about that. Yeah, so we put a dent in the universe. It was so much work. I can't believe it. I had to fly in this Guinness Book of World Record judge who like wore like, what do you call those things that just go over your ears when it's cold? They wear it in the city.
Earmuffs?
Earmuffs. Yeah, earmuffs and like a blazer. It was so funny that, you know, that's like one of those lessons I learned that actually didn't move the needle as much as I invested into it. And so I think it's kind of a cautionary tale.
It sounds like such a great idea. We're going to set a record.
Yeah, hesitation isn't always a bad thing. You know, practicing a little pause, that can benefit those around you, because it seemed like a really good idea. Like people are really going to care about this. And it did garner a lot of like earned views. And, you know, we did pick up a lot of PR around it, but I can't say it moved the needle like I wished it had. But you're totally right. Like one big idea a year. Like, you know, I think where I'm at right now, you know, we're running 2 ski resorts and a Woodward. And, you know, it's a ton of work, like the daily operations to try to figure out how to make it work every day and all that stuff. But for me, it's always about bringing ideas to life. You know, that's what gives me energy. And so every year we do the same thing. Like, what are we going to do this year? What are we going to do? You know, what's going to be our big idea? And I'm super proud of that. Like for the last 7 years, we've won a national award for NSAA. That's like the National Ski Areas Association. It's like the governing body for all of North America. And we've won, like Little Boreal and Woodward and Soda Springs has won like one of like the few big awards every year for the last 7 years. And fingers crossing, tomorrow we're going to win one more for our new Go Time tickets.
And that's where you've kind of changed the dynamic of pricing and timing, right? Like you were like, hey, people don't all want to come to the resort at the same time. People aren't going to ski this long. And you've kind of made it where everything's almost negotiable.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool. Like skiing, like I said, I grew up in it. So skiing's like an antiquity, right? Like it's like, yeah, we have a ski resort. We're the only game in town. We can charge whatever we want. And, you know, that's just not really like contemporary business strategy. So, you know, we're close to the Bay. We're close to like startup city. And so I always try to challenge our team to think like a startup. And I've got great partners like Amy Oran, who's our GM, who's like a total boss. And she's my partner in crime with bringing these ideas to life. And so we said the same thing. We're like, okay, well, we have two problems to solve. We're like, with COVID, we can't have, mass congregation at the bottom in the base area. And ticketing is a big deal because everyone just like harps on like the ticket price. So why don't we, hit them both at the same time? So we created this thing called Go Time Tickets, and it's basically 7 different tiers. It goes down. So the highest price is at 9 a.m. when the mountain opens, and then the lowest price is at 3 p.m. And then there's pricing that goes down every hour. So it did two things. It staggered the arrival process to make it safer for COVID and to have like an attestation plan that the county would approve. But more importantly, like it opens up your demographics. Like, yo, it's 11 o'clock. You want to go skiing? You're like, no, we already missed 3 hours. You're like, well, why don't we just buy a ticket for noon or 1 and let's go get a mimosa? I think what it is it's just contemporary business strategy overlaid with skiing, which is really like the mindset that I try to take towards everything. It's like, how can we think like a startup with all these millions of dollars of capital already? Because that seems like a lot better than thinking of a startup with nothing.
It's like on-demand skiing. When you want to do it, you can do it, and you only pay for that. And tomorrow's the day you find out you'll win the award. I'm going to say you probably will. And then just looking at the awards that you've won, I've got a list of them here. The Golden Eagle Environmental Award at Soda Springs, same award at Boreal, Best Use of Mobility Tech, Best Guest Safety, Liftopia Top 10 Skier Days, Liftopia Rookie of the Year Award, Partner of Awesomeness with the High Fives Foundation. Do any of these mean more than the rest, or do you just like to win an award for your hard work every year?
I know, isn't that so funny? It's like you say it like that. I'm obviously driven by some sort of shiny medal. I just like the finality of an award, because like you can drop in and out of favor, with whoever. And I just like that being be like, we took it, it's ours. And so what kind of impact or legacy that I want to leave? And, I'm looking for deep work. I want something that outlasts me. So some of the environmental excellence awards were huge, right? Those were giant, like public-private partnerships, like the Soda Springs Recycled Water Project. We were the first in California and second in the country to run like 100% recycled water for snowmaking system. That impacts the environment, impacts the community. It sets the standard for like moving forward in like, a cool way. Or one year we built a video game with my homies up at Hovercraft up in Oregon, where we built Boreal Magic. And it was a mobile first video game because at the time, I just hated online advertising. It just seemed so annoying and obtrusive. So it was like, let's build a video game and let's make our own soundtrack and we'll get people to play it and they'll be playing in our brand and it'll be free and it'll be fun and we'll collect data and then we can serve them up some stuff later. And so every year there's like so many projects. Like Pop-Up Park was really cool. We built this plan because the week before the holidays was really dead. And then the holidays were just like, unbearable. And so we would do these pop-up parks where we build a park where it didn't belong. The week before the holiday, people would come up. And what was cool about it is like Vail and Altera would be spending so much money that we really couldn't compete on an advertising level. Like there's just no inventory and it wouldn't work anyway. And so we came at it with this like organic earned approach where we would have a cool park where it shouldn't belong. And we would invite the rad pros and we'd do a media partnership with Snowboarder or whatever. And then kids would come up and then all of a sudden it would create this FOMO because it would only be open for like a week or 2 weeks. And so it wasn't just like an annoying ad that we were paying top dollar for. It was earned stuff where your friends and heroes were out there riding something that would only be up for a week. There was no contest. You wouldn't be late. You show up whenever you want. You pay for a ticket or you get a pass. Like it was just like a kind of a cool concept that I really learned from Academy. Like everybody's a winner. Who cares about first place? Like nobody cares next week. So we should just like invite everybody to the party and come when you want.
Peace Park falls into that?
It's along the same lines. Peace Park is Danny Davis's creation.
Yep.
It's amazing. He worked with Chris Gunnarsson on it and the rest of the team at Powder brought to life. Like it's actually like a huge body of work.
Yeah, you guys bend over to make it happen, I feel like.
Oh, totally. And Danny Davis, come on. Snowboarding's a unicorn. Like that kid is amazing. He brings such light to the sport. And so he lives in Truckee and he'll come up whenever he's not traveling or whatever. So we were like, let's bring your dreams to life, And it rolls across all of Powder. And so he's got really cool Peace Parks, from Bachelor to Copper to Killington. But we always take pride in ours because he lives here.
Yeah. I guess at this point, we've gone through a lot of the podcasts, but I like to end each one of my podcasts with something that you're familiar with. It's called Inappropriate Questions. And I was working to get Chad to ask you inappropriate questions, and Chad sent over 3 questions, but they were kind of cookie cutter. So Chad, while he did help, I'm not going to ask his questions. Then I went over to Dave Amirault, and Digi Dave is a resort guy. He was a resort guy. Now he's a tech guy. And Digi Dave, I figured, would come up with some great resort questions. We were supposed to talk this morning, but he ended up on a conference call. But then he texted me over some questions that I'm going to read to you right now. So your first inappropriate question, which I'm reading for the first time.
Jesus.
Do you think that the mega passes, Epic and Icon, have been good for the skiing and riding experience? Also, copping out and saying that they make skiing more affordable is not an acceptable answer.
What a dick.
Yeah, well, I was hoping he would go this way, and he did.
Yeah, I love that dude. So it's a good question. Well, he phrased it very specifically. Do I think it's better for the skiing experience, right? So that's a very specific question. So I'd say the skiing experience, well, volume over yield, there's going to be more people on the hill. So that can really impact things. But on the flip side, I think there's bringing a lot more people. The white space is growing. I mean, I can't really comment, it's just like, I'm not personally involved in those passes. We're really focused on our story here, right? We're dropping these new memberships where you buy like a 4-month membership, just like Woodard Park City, you get access to the whole mountain and you're billed like $139 a month. So we're really flipping the script on that thing. And so while I don't have a specific answer on the mega passes, I do have an alternative that we're rocking out here at Woodward Tahoe.
I am going to jump into Dave's next inappropriate question. If you could change one thing about the ski industry, what would it be? And this is not a chance to complain about global warming.
Oh my gosh, these are hard questions.
Well, he sent some soft questions over and I said that they weren't good enough. So then he texted over these hard ones while we were in the podcast. So your third one is going to be an easy one, but this hard one you're going to have to answer.
All right. So it's difficult to unpack such a big 100-year business into one question. But I would say that if you were to look at the skier numbers over, a 50-year period and you'd see the growth trends, you would see two things going up. You'd see price going up and, you would see visitation kind of tapering, not down, but not at the same growth. So what I'd like to see is a bigger partnership between the brands that make equipment and everything and the ski industry themselves, because there seems to be a pretty big disconnect between the two. Like they're almost like unrelated. Like I don't know how many brands really follow like the skier numbers and really understand things. They're really focused on shops and sales. But where I think there's a huge opportunity is to get more people into it. So today's question is like, what would I do? I would continue to try to make it much more inclusive because I think we all know that it's like an antiquated business and we need to make our business more contemporary. And I think there's a huge opportunity with all the existing product that's out there and all the people who have never tried skiing and snowboarding, like that huge waste stream that happens between old gear going to the dump and the initiated skiers getting the newish stuff every year.
Yep.
And so I think if we could become more inclusive, we could create avenues and pathways for people to come in at a much more affordable price and then create a flow of older, unwanted gear for those people. Again, this doesn't have to be at the biggest resorts. Like this could be at your local, Wild Mountains and Trollhagens or whatever. But I think all of a sudden we bring a lot more diversity into it because price is such a deterrent.
That's what I always say is people are like, oh, well, we're not marketing to these people or this group or that group. And it's like, no, if you want to go skiing for one day just to see if you like it, by the time you've rented gear, you've spent gas money to get up there, you've bought your lift ticket, you might have to get a hotel, you've paid for meals. It's like for one person, you're spending $500 and no one spends $500 just to see if they like something.
Yeah. And what's cool is, so we do this thing called Feel Good Fridays. So we do one day a month. We do tickets for $25 and then we give $5 to Roy Tuscany at High Fives.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so we've raised a lot of money for Roy. We love the High Fives. We love their organization. They're our charity of choice.
Mine too.
Yeah. But the thing is what's cool about it is we create avenues. So the same way like Go Time tickets, what it does is it challenges the narrative where you can sell a premium lift ticket for $100 or whatever, but you can at the same time offer a ticket for $40 that's at a different time. They can coexist, high price and low price, and the same thing. So if you want to value engineer and we want to be more inclusive, then you've got to think about it all the way through. And I think if we want to grow the sport and change the narrative that snowboarding is a lifelong sport and winter sports can save lives and change your direction. And I think we got to think about it. And we need partners. It can't just be like, oh, the ski industry is too expensive. And the board companies are being like, we're doing everything right. Like, they have to work closer together.
All right. Well, I'm going to go with your last inappropriate question. I will make it a layup for you here. Do Rurock helmets count as a mask for Tanner Hall when he's at Woodward? He didn't add Tanner Hall, but I threw that part in there.
I love Tanner Hall. That kid is such a G. Come back to Tahoe. Sure.
And I'm going to go with this one bonus question because I don't know what the answer is, and it's a weird one to me. Why does Boreal have to remove all the power outlets from their bathrooms?
Well, we have two demographics up here. We have people who are totally new to skiing and snowboarding. We call them new American families. It's kind of a demographic we coined, and we work with Visit California on that. And these are kind of first, second generation Americans who are seeking mountain traditions, and they really don't know, right? They're the very first time. Let's go to the mountains, go to the snow. Let's do it. And they have different lifestyles, and they're looking for different things. So not so much now, but in the past, we've had a lot of people like plug in their cookware, maybe it's a crock pot or a heating element, anywhere lunch? They can find it, right? And, a lot of that's tough because we're not offering like every dietary need. But when I first got here, I thought I knew skiing. And it was really funny because, I grew up skiing. I'm white. I traveled all around the world snowboarding, filmed with Warren Miller and did the X Games. And I came here and all of a sudden my eyes opened, being like, whoa, there's a whole other side to skiing. And people don't know, and they didn't grow up with skiing and snowboarding. And so they're just kind of paving their own way and doing what they think is right. And that's what's actually been really cool, because that demographic, like learning to work with these people and figure out what their wants and needs are and how to make it cool and teach them the right way. Like I said, the next generation of action sports, even if they don't know it yet, is pretty cool, because that wave is going to move east. You know what I mean? We're going to run out of baby boomers, and we're going to need some new demos to teach that skiing and snowboarding can change your life.
All right. Well, that is the podcast. I want to thank you for your time, and in just talking to you, it's like you are one of those guys who totally gets it and has a vision for the future, has a vision to grow the sport. And not one thing that you said throughout this whole podcast made me shake my head and think, this guy doesn't get it. It's just like everything was so on point and on brand with what you've done your whole career. And it's refreshing to see that someone in a position of power at a very important company in the ski industry is the right person for the job, because it's not always the case. And thank you for that, man.
Oh, shucks, brother. You're making me blush.
Well, that's what I try to do.
Shred till dead, everybody. Come on out. Let's have some fun in Tahoe.
$25 Fridays. You'll find them there once a month.
Phew. Thanks so much for sharing, man. Really appreciate it. Thank you, snowboarding. Thank you, family. Thanks, all the friends.
So that was time with Matt Peterson, and what a smart guy. The one thing that sticks in my head about this interview is that guys our age, we don't define what's cool. The youth does that. Once the adult thinks they're cool or they know what's cool, you know it's not. It's almost like when trucker hats made it to Target. You knew that fad was over once your parents had access to them and started wearing them. So Matt's ahead of the curve in knowing what the youth wants by actually being aware of the fact that he doesn't know exactly what the youth wants, but he'll listen and make things happen. And pretty much everything Matt said within the podcast all made sense to me. And there's not that many people, I feel like, behind the scenes in the action sports business that totally get every aspect of it. Matt is one of those guys, and it was a pleasure to talk to, and I look forward to having a beer with Matt in the future. I should also mention that Matt and his team won their award for their Go Time ticketing, and this year's big project was another award-winning success. So congrats to the team at Boreal for making that happen. That's the podcast for this week. At this point, I want to read you the review of the week. It comes from Derek Sakamoto, and it's another 5-star review. This one's long, and it's titled, Finally Reaching Its True Potential with Rory Bushfield. Let's be clear, Mike is great. He is a natural gift that he used throughout his career, connecting him with the best in the industry. He is not shy about it and structures his interviews similarly, doing research and asking direct questions. However, the Rory Bushfield interviews were next level. Hearing what Rory got out his career and the inspiration that drives him was amazing. Mountain sports are as popular as ever. And what else do people get out of it other than fun? It's hard to answer. Frankly, there wasn't one here either. But the story of Rory's life may inspire one. Maybe the credit goes to Rory, but honestly, Mike deserves a ton of credit on this one. His empathy and finesse around Sarah's death gave room for Rory's story to get out. If you don't know who Sarah Burke was, she was the one woman that literally the whole industry was in love with. I still remember how the ski camp lift lines got deafeningly quiet every time she entered the maze. Everyone's jaws dropped and whispered, "Oh my God, there's Sarah Burke." No other athlete, including Tanner Hall, had that presence. Any other podcast host would have totally messed up this interview because that would have been the focus. Mike, great job. It'll be hard to top this work, but I hope you do. Thank you for that really, really nice, awesome review, Derek. That means a lot, and I really feel like Roy did most of the heavy lifting on this one. I did do the research to make it happen, but man, what a story that guy has, and it's just fun listening to him talk. So that's a great review. Derek, you need to email me, and I will send you a custom beanie, a limited edition custom beanie. If anybody who's listening would like a beanie, you can buy one on my website, or you can submit a review of the week. If I read it during the podcast, I will send you a beanie. It is that easy. So that's what you need to know. I want to thank you for listening to the podcast. At this point, it's time for me to thank my amazing sponsors who make this thing happen. They are Alpine Vans, the 10 Barrel Brewery, Stanley, Peter Glenn Ski and Sports, and Rollerblade. Have a great week, everyone.